We're going to discuss a little bit of this week's annual cycle because that's the one that most of our viewers are sticking to. That's the one that's most familiar. It's also the one that coincidentally happens to now fit with certain seasons. So it's beginning of the rainy season here in the land of Israel. It's supposed to start raining, and it did start raining this Shabbos, and it's Parshas Noach. So people make a big deal about that. What do we have? We have, like the Bar-Hayim points out, Noach is perhaps the most praised tzaddik in the Torah. There's many honorifics given to him. First, it says that he alone found favor in God's eyes, which is saying quite a lot. And that says he was an ish and a tzaddik. It's a little bit redundant why they call him an ish. So, like Rashi points out, ish means he was a big shot. And tzaddik, pshut o kamashmo, that was in his actions. Tamim haya b'zer without. Tamim haya, he used to be flawless. We're going to discuss that. That's the word we're going to focus on today. Most on its most basic level, it means that not just in deed, but also in thought. And compared to his generations, that means he was someone who stuck out. Considering that he lived to be 950 years old, just after Jared and Methuselah, that's the longest lifespan we have also in the biblical history. So that's could be. I like the pshat that says that even in Abraham's time, he was a standout for his piety. And then it says that he would self-walk with God. I don't say he halach with God. It says hith halech. It's a hith pa'el. And also that could be a shir unto itself, why it says that him and other righteous individuals did that type of walking with God. Okay, but either way, there's quite a few honorifics there. Tamim, on one level, means that he was physically perfect. And Chazal actually learned from this that he was fit to be a korban. And the rules nowadays, the eternal rules that govern what type of sacrifice Gentiles are allowed to bring, that is, Bnei Noach are allowed to bring to God, whether within our temple or at any other altar that they build dedicated to God and a sacrifice, which is totally permissible for them, by the way. And it's been permissible since the beginning of time. So the animals that they bring, they have to be of a certain standard, of free of blemish, not as high the standards that we subscribe to in our temple that's been given to us by Moses. And there's a tractate of the Talmud about this. We had a series of shurim reviewing all this. But we learn from this that just like Noah was a tamim, so too animals for sacrifice to God should also be tamim. They should be physically flawless. The Targum of Onkelos translates tamim as shalim, complete. And this is an adjective used to describe what God wanted from Abraham when God told Abraham, walk with me and be flawless. Now, it's kind of interesting. Abraham was commanded to do this, which means that until this point, perhaps Abraham had not yet achieved that level of piety, whereas Noah is described as having already achieved that level. Okay, maybe Abraham achieved it at a younger stage. It also is the Onkelos translation of the word tam. Tam is, I guess, it's the singular of tamim. When it says Yaakov was ish tam, so Onkelos also says he was shalim. Another level interpretation says that both of them had physically perfect bodies. Abraham was given this commandment to be a tamim before he was given the commandment of circumcision. This was an introduction to the commandment of circumcision. I'm giving this commandment in order to be physically perfect. Your body is not yet perfect. Whereas people like Jacob, Yaakov Avinu, and Noah, so they were born circumcised. They were already physically perfect. Okay. We're going to get into the more halachic shot understanding. The Torah itself has what many say is one of the 613 commandments, but not everybody. Some say it's just a musar. It fits into context. The commandment to be tamim. Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. What does that mean in context? There's a parasha right in the middle of Shoftim. That is the parsha of Shoftim. By parsha, I mean the weekly reading and of Shoftim. And when the first time I used that word, I meant a paragraph in the Torah. So in the weekly Torah reading of Shoftim, right in the middle of the book of Deuteronomy, you have the commandments to avoid all sorts of fortune tellers, soothsayers, magicians, whatever it may be, the necromancers. They're all lumped together. You're not supposed to listen to them. Instead, Moshe Rabbeinu says, be a tamim with God. And then he continues and says, there is a way to have supernatural knowledge, that which cannot be known through clairvoyance, or to know the future. What is the permissible way of going about obtaining this knowledge? To become in contact with one of God's prophets. God has promised us prophets. So if we want to know what really is going on, we are to consult one of them. But we're not supposed to go to any of these other no good nicks. Now, there is a general machlokes, I guess. If you're just studying the books, the Jewish classical books, you'll say, oh, it's a machlokes. Did any of this actually have any, I guess, reality to it, or were they all just frauds? And for our purposes, it doesn't make a difference. Let's just say they attribute to Rashi and others, the irrationalists, that yes, the necromancers and the fortune tellers, the magicians, and whatever else you may have, they did have the capacity to do things, perhaps perform witchcraft and change things, powers, and they could even see the future, and perhaps they had clairvoyance. But the Torah prohibited us for to consult them. And you could take the Maimonidean, etc. approach, which says they never had any power whatsoever. It's all nonsense. But unfortunately, there are people still believe in them. Usually it's a very good relationship. And most people know about this nowadays. You have the fortune teller, the soothsayer, whatever it may be. He's a fraud. But why do people go to him? Because for him, it's good because he can make money off of them. He rips them off. And they really believe in it. There are too many superstitious people throughout history who are just waiting to be suckered. Right? That's how it is. So the Torah is saying it's improper for Jews to do this. Rashi says something very important. Rashi says what we're going to get at here. What does it mean to be tamim with God? I'm using the Mosader of Cook edition of Rashi, and we said before on Thursday. Yeah, I think the Nikud is with a chirik here. He says, "Hithalech imo bitmimut." Walk with him with naivety, but it doesn't mean in a foolish one or a young one. It means being flawless, being perfectly trusting in God. And by the way, that's where Rashi's making this connection with self-walking, walking with God, and this tamimut is a similar, I guess, connection that we saw with regards to Noah and Abraham. It says Noah was tamim haya b'dorothav, and then he self-walked with God, and that's what Abraham was commanded to do. So Rashi brings that word hithalech, that verb over here when in Deuteronomy where it says to be tamim tiyeh, and it says utsabelo, okay? Look forward. Okay? You should always be looking out for God. Lo tachkor achar ha'atidot. Do not start investigating the future. Okay? Too many people want to know, instead of just taking things as they come, they need to have advanced knowledge of the future. And this mitzvah is saying that is improper. Ella, instead, kol ma sheyavo alecha, kabel bithmimuth. Whatever comes upon you, accept it innocently. Complete trust in God. So once you do that, you'll be with God all the time. What does this mean? It means that Noah himself had this ability to accept whatever God says. And by the way, that's why we find no dialogue between God and Noah. We don't say, and Noah said unto God, like all these other great characters. It says Abraham actually argued with God, as did Moses. And Yaakov Avinu had his prayers to God. We find no such prayers of Noah. We have no intercession. We don't find, like someone to say, Noah is completely passive in these parashiyot. But Noah, we don't hear from him at all. He just says, God says, and Noah did. Perhaps that is to Noah's credit. He accepted what God had to say. He went with it. And he didn't try to ask too much about the future. Now, why is this significant for Abraham? Well, the first is that Abraham's subsequent tests, he went through quite a few tests once God came to him at the age of 99. When Abraham was 99, said, you know what, you're going to have to be tamim with me. You're going to have to walk with me and be a tamim. This was the key to how he was going to pass all of his subsequent tests. Abraham had been told, for example, you are going to get this beautiful land. It's all yours. God is promising it to you and your descendants. Great. And then the test was, he had to leave the land of Israel. Suddenly he was told this is land, settle here. And then, now he's got to go. What happened? That was the test. That was beforehand. And now he's being told, be a tamim. Just because you've been told many things, you've even had the bris bein basarim, you've been promised this land. We've had this whole ritual of sacrifice, and it's foreshadowing the sacrificial ritual that will continue in the temple, which will be Israel's, I guess, deed, okay? Its connection to land. It's going to be the commandments through their merit. The Israelites will constantly hold on to the land, even though he had been through this already, he'd been promised land a number of times, God's now telling him, if you really want to hold on to land, you have to keep the covenant of circumcision, which, by the way, is quite difficult. Imagine being 100 years old, being introduced to this idea. Okay? Leap of faith. Trust me, circumcise yourself. It's not an easy thing. But it says that Abraham and his son, Ishmael, and all of his followers, they dutifully accepted this from God. Why? Because even though God had promised him this, Abraham was still told, you can't know too much about the future. You have to go with it. You can't say, well, I've already been told. I know I'm supposed to be a great nation. This is my son, and I'm endangering myself and my reproductive capacity. No, God wants you to do this. And later, driving out Ishmael was also part of this challenge because God had promised him, even though he had told him he'll have a different son who will be the continuation of his legacy. Ishmael was still meant to be something big, but God then said, get rid of him. So he had to worry about this. Perhaps say, I don't get it. Wasn't I told I have positive knowledge of the future? No, you don't have a complete positive knowledge. You just have little bits of and pieces. You have to take it as it comes. That's why God said, listen to your wife, Sarah. She might even be, she knows more about this than you do. And most importantly, the Akedah itself. Avram Avinu had been told, this son, your remaining son, he is it. He is your future. And then he was told, actually turn him into a burnt offering. That'd be the end of him. And Isaac had yet to have any children, of course, at that point. That would have been the end of it. But he was told, just go with it. So we have to be like Abraham. Why is this relevant today? Because even if you and I actually have knowledge of the future, of which we do have some, for example, we have confident knowledge in the future because the prophets have told us this. We've seen parts of their prophecies of redemption come true in the previous generations. We know that just like the Jewish people have already returned to the land of Israel, and there's been a kibbutz galiot, in gathering of the exiles, and the rebirth of the Jewish Commonwealth, so too the temple will be rebuilt. The dead will be resurrected. The sacrificial service will be reinstituted. Idolatry will disappear from this world. The King Messiah will arrive and reign over Israel and the whole world. I have that positive knowledge of the future, but that's the limit of my knowledge of that future. I can't go and say, you know what, I've now created in my mind, or even great rabbis have created in their mind an image, an order about how all of these great events of the future are supposed to unfold, and therefore they're going to reject what they have happening in front of their eyes and say, you know what, I don't like this. Is it not happening? I'm not going with this. What is the example? What we've discussed before. The former chief rabbi, now the former chief rabbi, for example, just a good example of this, said that he doesn't want anybody even talking about, discussing the issue of rebuilding the temple and the sacrificial service, or even going to visit the temple. Why? The Messiah has to come first. Now, of course, we've shown that that's explicitly against what Maimonides says. No one really knows what the order is going to be, but because they've decided that this has to be the order of how the future is supposed to unfold, they're only going to accept it that way, and they're not going to allow it to continue unfolding. Whereas the view espoused by Rashi, understanding what it means to be tamim, means that you're just supposed to do what you have to do. Right now, the Jewish people have commandments to take care of the temple and see to its rebuilding, see to the sacrificial service. Every single day, God is waiting for us to do this, but we're just not going about doing it. We can't say, well, we know a little bit about future. Mashiach is supposed to come first. That's not the right way of looking at it. You're supposed to be a tamim. And as a nation, we're supposed to be tamimim. We're just supposed to try to do whatever we can. And as I said, this was the opinion of none other than the Maccabees, who did not sit around waiting for the Messiah to come and go about bringing, let's say, the purification of the temple and the reinstitution of sacrificial service, and also fighting Milchemes Mitzvah. Instead, they took it upon themselves to do it. Why? Because that's what we're supposed to. So today, being tamimim with Hashem, walking faithfully with God and trusting completely in what He is giving us, means that we'll try to do as much as we can and not ignore the mitzvahs that we haven't done until today. And by the way, we'd also like to point out, like we usually do, that assuming, let's say, the more extreme opinion, the more machmir opinion, Jews should not go to the Temple Mount right now because it involves all sorts of halachic prohibitions. I'd like to say that perhaps they should also enforce the fact that no Gentiles whatsoever should be going there, and certainly not being in control of the place or having any say about what goes on there. That should be the case. But the problem is they're very happy to tell Jews not to go, but there's no active movement, especially politically. They've tried to use political pressure at their disposal to prevent Jews from going to the Temple Mount, but they haven't done anything whatsoever to, let's say, make sure that all of those vicious anti-Semites are removed from the Temple Mount. Okay, what are you going to do?